Directorate Board to join us. Thank you, Lixing, for starting the recording. I would like to welcome you to the third session, and this year we are proud to present a series of 4 webinars that are part of the colloquium. This is the third one, as I mentioned. The colloquium topic is about uncertainty in international education and internationalization of higher ed. I don't think I need to explain why we call it uncertainty. Everybody's more or less having a sense of what that looks like. Um, Before I get started, I also like to share that here at ACPA. Okay, let me actually share my screen. Um, quick. Okay. Um, I would like to share that here at ACPA, we are invested in the idea of equity, and I would like to share our equity and inclusion statement with you. Please make sure you take time to read and understand ACPA's commitment to equity and inclusion here. My colleagues are going to put the link in the chat box too. Um, I also want to note that we are actively hiring in the commission. We have a lot of new positions in the directorate boards. Involvement in the directorate board provides the opportunity for ongoing engagement with colleagues with a shared interest in international education and cross-cultural learning.
My fault, my ego, my huge.
Somebody needs to potentially mute. Sorry about that. So involvement in the directorate would provide an opportunity for getting involved with colleagues who share similar interests in international education and cross-cultural learning. We have about 10 positions, and the deadline to apply is coming up in a few weeks, so that would be May 15. The application link would be in the chat box, and I will talk about that at the end too. So, as I mentioned, for those of you joining new, welcome, and please start to potentially put your name, pronouns, where you're currently located, and your position in the chat box so everybody knows who's in the room and who is part of this conversation. And it's 5 minutes in, so I think we can start the session officially, where the title is Allyship and Building Support Systems Across Cultural, Social, and National Contexts. And our panelists are Dr. Aisha Khurshid, Dr. Will Kagil-Behrens, and Dr. Panita Lamb. They are very esteemed colleagues and scholar practitioners in the field. I'm really excited to have them. The session explores leadership and allyship. Going back. The session explores leadership, allyship, and support for international students during the current challenges facing international populations and relations in the United States. Our panelists serve as professionals and faculty across various national and sociopolitical contexts, from Florida to Minnesota and Ontario, Canada. Let me introduce each of the panelists before asking them a few questions and start us off. Dr. Aisha Khurshid is an associate professor of international and multicultural education in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at Florida State University. Her research focuses on the issues of education, culture, and gender for different communities. As an ethnographer, Aisha has been working in partnership with different communities to explore community-centered knowledge systems and ways of knowing. She has collaborated with rural Muslim communities in Pakistan for over a decade and with an indigenous Maya Muslim community in Chiapas for 5 years. Aisha is currently working with Maya college students from Belize to explore the relationship between different Maya communities and mainstream formal education institutions in Belize. Welcome. Dr. Will Kagil-Behrens is the Dean of Global Education at Minnesota State University. Prior to joining Minnesota State University, Mankato in 2024, he was a clinical associate professor of multilingual education at the University of Iowa, where he also co-directed the Linda R. Baker Teacher Leader Center, was associate department chair and program coordinator for the Multilingual Education Teacher Education Program and master's in teaching leadership and cultural competency. Will is also the author of 3 books focused on careers in K-12 and higher education. Welcome to the panel, Will. Dr. Punita Lam is a scholar practitioner in higher education, currently serving as the Director of Student Engagement and Campus Life Organization at the University of Toronto's Scarborough campus. I hope I pronounced it right. She holds a PhD in higher education with a specialization in international and comparative studies. She has won the Best Dissertation Award by the Higher Education League of the Comparative International Education Society, or CIES. Her work has focused on student engagement and creating spaces of belonging for both student and staff through various programs and initiatives at an institutional level and with partners across North America. Welcome, Panida, and welcome to all of you and thank you for joining this panel conversation today. Let me get my screen so I see all the 3 of you. Perfect. And I wanted to start us off with a conversation. I know you're doing research across international contexts. You have global partnerships or managing global partnerships. You're doing work supporting international students and internationalization efforts on your campus. So I kind of wanted to start us off broad and ask you to tell us a little bit about what you do and also how have you been experiencing this uncertain sociopolitical moment and what strategies have you found to live and lead into this moment? Maybe I start by calling people. Dr. Khurshid, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the invitation. It's such a pleasure to be here in conversation with all of you. Thank you so much. And how much time do I have? Just to make sure, because, we can go on talking forever, or at least I can.
I think like 5 to 6, 7 minutes would be fine.
Okay, sounds good. So I just want to start by saying that right now, where I'm situated, which is Tallahassee, Florida, it is our university, and the city itself is located on the indigenous lands of Appalachian Nation, the Muskogee Creek Nation, the Muskogee Tribe of Florida, and the Seminole Tribe of Florida. So, starting with the international students on campus, I think in Florida, as some of you might know, more recently there have been policies that have made the access for international students much more restricted. So, for example, so there are federal policies, but there are also state level policies that states like Florida and Texas and a few other states have passed. One of them is called Countries of Concern, which means that the students who are admitted from those countries have to go through this additional screening, which takes much longer and it makes it impossible for us to offer them funding for the first year. So those countries of concern include China, Iran, and other countries. So as we can see that this is not outrightly saying that students from these countries cannot come, but it is making it practically impossible for a large number of students to actually be able to come here. So even when they go through the screening, we are not allowed to offer them funding for the first year. And I've been an international student myself, and many of you are probably familiar with all the visa issues that you actually have to show the assets that you have to support yourself for the first year if you don't have funding from the university, which of course is not possible for a large number of students. So there are policies like that that have really changed just the basic access issue in the way, because we previously were focusing a lot on participation of international students. Not that access was not complicated and complex, but it was seen as something that there was extensive support for, and participation was something that the university and many of us were focusing on. But now the access itself has become the way it is defined in a mainstream way has become much more problematic. The second aspect, in terms of how it has shaped the uncertainty for us, I think there are many ways that it is happening. So it is not only for the students who are trying to apply for funding, admissions, and visa, but also international students who are already here. Because we have received guidelines from the university in terms of some travel restrictions and taking university equipment, including laptops, to different international locations. So that introduces, along with everything else that is happening, a certain level of uncertainty and unpredictability in terms of leaving your your kind of where you are located at that time. So it has gone to the extent that students do not feel comfortable even traveling domestically to attend conferences and other events. So and that would lead to certain professional development challenges, but also students who want to travel internationally to see their families and to be in their home countries. That would lead to, I imagine, a number of issues, including anxiety and other issues. So I want to be mindful of time and not take too much time because I really want to hear from others. Um, so, in terms of the strategies, I think the way at least some of us have been engaging with it is that how to kind of shift our focus from institutional policies that are critically important, of course, and we need to continue to work towards better policies, but kind of seeing the other resources that the institution offers and use them more strategically to support international students. So, for example, if there's funding available or research opportunities available, how to use them strategically to support international students. So, of course, there are challenges there in terms of research funding and all of that. So, um, I think the need is to become more creative without losing that critical focus on structural issues. So, within the structures, where can we find some support? Who are some of the allies? Because the way institutions kind of switched really quickly in the US was quite surprising for many of us. And a lot of supportive allies and spaces kind of um, became invisible or are not there anymore. But there are still some spaces that are there. And if the change in language or change of strategies can help us access them in a meaningful way, then what does that look like? And I feel that it has brought us to this level where that solidarity really matters. Instead of relying on institutions, how can we rely on communities? Whereas that is a community of scholars or community of students or different communities. So, what does that solidarity look like where we can actively and proactively share these opportunities, strategies, and resources with each other to support that? So, it's almost like pushing outward to make these spaces broader, but doing it in a way that is meaningful and can be effective. So there's a lot that we can learn from each other. And that's why I think conversations like these could be very helpful. So I'll pause here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's really helpful. And three of the words that I took away and wrote down was the strategy, creativity, and community. I really appreciate that. So I'm going from the geographical map from south to north. So you would be next, Dr. Kakil Burns.
Thank you, Dr. Mohabali. And thank you, Dr. Kershad. I totally concur with everything that you've just said. So as Dr. Mohabali just referenced, my name is Will Coghill-Behrens. I'm the Dean of Global Education at Minnesota State University, Mankato. I'm almost at my second year anniversary, so I no longer feel like a newbie here. Um, but I will tell you that the very first year I was here was so different than the second year because I think all of us would say that this last year in our work and in our field as international educators has just been so disruptive. At Minnesota State, I work with both all of our inbound degree seeking students, our international scholars through the J visa program, and also supervise all of our outbound programs and faculty led programs in addition to a Center for English Language Programs and Customized Programs. And I am remiss in mentioning that where I work at Minnesota State is the ancestral and contemporary lands of the Dakota people, the Dakota Nation. This is a really rich state in terms of its connections to the international world and its commitments to globalization. And it's been something that has really led Minnesota State Mankato in the last several decades. We're at the top of Open Doors reporting in terms of the size of our international student populations. And one of the reasons we attract such a large number of international students is because we offer, to Dr. Kersheed's point, such a wonderful, inclusive, and nurturing environment for these students. And I will say, like I'm in Minnesota, and so every promise that we made about the safety of that environment, about the ability to engage in a free and positive and emotionally healthy educational experience was really put on the line by this incredible ICE enforcement that happened in this state over the last several months. The visibility of ICE in our communities, and we are outside of the Minneapolis metro area where there was an incredible presence, but they were still so visible in our communities. They parked outside my home and outside the home of other members of our global education staff, right? And it's hard in this space to not let your mind go to like, what is the insidiousness behind these actions and behind what's happening? For us, I think it was really important to really lean into our values as a university, right? Like the international community is really who made Minnesota State Mankato what it is. And we were going to do everything that we could, and we did everything that we could to protect them, make them feel safe, and remind them like they are just as much a part of our community, in spite of the fact that there was sort of this toxic rhetoric and toxic events happening. The other thing that we're now sort of really dealing with is the lasting effects of trauma and the lasting effects of individuals having to carry the weight of the heaviness of this shift in policy from, a wonderfully supportive, inclusive, and I would say sort of immigration policy that allowed individuals curating those programs at schools to help students make appropriate decisions for their educational programs, to now a policy where we have to move everything through the government, right? Including degree program extensions, et cetera. You are all student professionals, and so the degree taking patterns and course taking patterns of students, right? And that it's never perfect, it's never clean, and it's never totally linear, right? And this is the nature of education. And so we've had to really, I think, lean into not only our values in terms of who we are and what our identity is, but also in terms of helping sort of now adapt to how our students are different as a result of this immigration action, the immigration enforcement, and in the state of Minnesota. I will say, though, that I am so proud of the way that this community, not only locally, our Mankato community and region, but the way the Twin Cities really coalesced around these values of inclusion, of neighborliness, right? Of supporting and loving our neighbors and caring for neighbors in their time of need. Lots of resources and supports were stood up that were incredible, from grocery and ride services to go to appointments, so individuals who didn't feel safe always had somebody to accompany them, to, of course, reminding students of what their constitutional rights were, and the kinds of documents that they should carry to be safe, and avoid, those sorts of confrontations that still feel very unsafe, right? They still feel, because we're not dealing with the predictability of, and I know that for many populations, there's never been sort of consistency with respect to how we engage with law enforcement. But for our engagement with international students, this was really a dramatic shift in how things were happening. So I would lean into another comment that Dr. Khurshid made, which is, so we're in this period of disruption, and it's really making us think about what is our strategy. I'll talk maybe a little bit later about sort of the ethical considerations of bringing international students to the States in a moment where we can't guarantee safety. I understand also the complexity of safety as a construct anyway, but in this particular moment, I feel there is a heightened risk for international students, obviously. And it's making us really think also and lean into like, this isn't just an international student issue. This is an all of us issue, right? How are we working with all of us, right? How are we teaming up with all parts and all individuals on our campus to continue to provide a safe, transformative, and really powerful learning experience for everybody? We all benefit from international students in our schools and communities, right? And we need to, again, engage and bring that benefit to life.
Thank you so much, Bill. The few things that stood out, one was leaning into values, which tells a lot about the institutions these days. And I really appreciated your comments about kind of confronting the reality and the new reality where the students are and adapting to it. I think that really stood out to me as a very important takeaway for myself. And just Minneapolis has been really exemplar in how community responded to it. So I really appreciate that part. Like grocery, going with somebody to an appointment, those are little things, but they matter to the individuals who are impacted. So those are really, really good examples. And I want to go to our third panelist, Dr. Punita Lam, who's a little bit further north and in Canada. And even though Canada is not on the news these days anymore, but it has had its own fair share of challenges on immigration.
Are we no longer being talked about as the 51st state? Is that no longer a thing? Thank you for having me here, and thank you everyone for making the time to be here. I love big questions, so bear with me as I go through all the different thoughts that came up, Milad, as you posed that question. I think first I'll just contextualize what's happening in Canada a little bit and where I am. So I am zooming in from Ontario. I'm at the University of Toronto, where I've been serving as Director for Student Engagement and Campus Life. And Toronto is a traditional land of the Seneca, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Ontario is, and Toronto in particular, is one of the major cities in Canada. The three, sort of the three biggest places when we think about where even international students are headed are usually thought of as British Columbia, so Vancouver on the west coast, Toronto kind of in the middle. We have Quebec as well, and then so those are usually Montreal. So those are usually the big hotspots. What's shifted in recent years in the Canadian context when it comes to international students, and it's certainly been a disruption, has been a cap on how many international students we are allowing in. And so Canada has always been one of the top destinations for international students. In particular, our top source countries are India and China. And what's happened in the past couple of years is the government has put a 2-year cap, which has reduced the number of international students by 30 to 40%, which is significant. In the Ontario context as well, we have been on a tuition freeze. And I think in general, funding from government to universities has been reducing over time. And so that has meant that institutions have been heavily dependent on international fees to make up for the shortfall. And so when this cap came in place, it meant that there were a number of reorganizations, programs closing, and layoffs happening in higher ed. So it's an uncertain time in higher education in Canada in general and in Ontario. And so there are, numerous reasons for the government placing the cap. One of the other things they did was also tighten the eligibility for students to be able to get a work permit after graduation. And they've also increased the amount of money or your financial resources that you need to be able to declare before you come to Canada as an international student. So this has created a great deal of uncertainty, one, for international students who no longer view Canada as a potential place to go. And so even though we've had our caps, the actual number of applicants, I think, have fallen below because people are opting out of coming to Canada. Because they're not seeing it as a friendly destination anymore, unfortunately. And then the other thing it's meant for staff is that amidst all the financial uncertainty and the layoffs, and when all of this was rolling out, it was coming out in pieces. So staff themselves now are trying to support international students who are frantic about all these different changes of what it means for them. And staff themselves are not sure what it means. And so they're trying to be a place of support for students, but also they're dealing with their own anxieties about what is happening in higher ed in general. And is this going to change I think the other thing that I want to bring in here, because my research interests and a lot of the work I've been doing in education for the past 2 decades has always focused on issues of equity and race and human rights. And so within this context of international students, the caps being placed, is that we are seeing a rise in South Asian hate. Now, India is the top source country of international students for Canada. And I have some stats here. So if you bear with me, let me just quickly pull them up because I didn't memorize them. But when we're talking about anti-South Asian hate, that increased, so hate crimes reported to the police increased by 227% between 2019 and 2023, which is huge. And Statistics Canada also took a look at online hate. And so on X, formerly Twitter, that platform alone saw a 1,000+% increase on anti-South Asian slurs between 2023 and 2024. And so I always want to, in my research and in my practice, I'm always thinking about our whole context. Yes, this thing around international students and CAPS is happening, but there's also this larger social context that this is happening in, and how do they connect, and what does it mean for our students? And so one of the things that's been coming up online and in conversations is this hate against South Asians at large, but Indian international students in particular, and they've been blamed for the Canadian housing crisis, the high unemployment rates. I mean, our economy is struggling, and I think many economies have been facing challenges post-COVID, and now you have other things happening. But Indian students in particular have become a scapegoat for all of those things that are happening in our economy. And I think it's really important to look at that, because to understand fully what our students are experiencing in their day-to-day, we have to be able to look at those larger contexts. And I think the other thing that this brings up for me always is it doesn't always, we're all intersectional, and having an international status may be one of our identities, but then just thinking about how all the different things that may be happening socially and impacting all the different social locations that our students may inhabit, and how that's impacting then their day-to-day journeys academically. And so a lot of my work has been focusing on that and figuring out how to best support them, which I'm happy to talk more about a little bit later. And so that's sort of the context we're in right now. So different from what's happening in the States, but certainly we've been impacted by what's happening in the States and what's happening globally. I mean, the thing now is, especially with social media, our worlds are smaller. And people care about what's happening globally, whether they are directly impacted or directly involved in something. It doesn't matter. What they're seeing, it is impacting their well-being. And so we are seeing the trickle effects of whatever may be happening globally, especially what's happening next door for our students and staff as well. The other thing I just wanted to touch on as well is, when I was thinking about this question, I actually took a bit of a philosophical detour as well. Like, what does it mean to lead in these times of uncertainty and disruption? And for myself, what I've been really focusing on, especially this year, is really sort of digging deep into, well, who am I? Like, who do I want to be as a leader, but not just as a leader, as a whole person? And how do I want to take care of my own well-being? Because certainly, it's not easy to witness or experience or be in spaces where you're trying to support others without being affected, without having your own well-being affected. And so one of the things I've been reflecting on is really about what are my core values? How do I want to show up in this world? What spaces do I want to hold for others, whether it's staff or students or faculty? And, for me, it's really digging into love and compassion. And the more uncertain things become and the more divisive things become, the more I anchor myself in who I am and what values I want to live, embody, and, manifest in whatever space I might be in. I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate in it's hard to hold the both end of talking about international students and scholars because it is a categorically large group of folks that people are serving and interacting in institutions. And I think your conversation also brings attention to the fact that there are different needs even within that category, like depending on where people come from and national backgrounds to, race, ethnicity, and all the different factors that really make it intersectional in terms of thinking how we want to help and support the students and the scholars. And a couple of things that I heard in what you shared that I appreciated because it is affecting both those folks and kind of Will was alluding to that too. It's about all of us. We are also being impacted on it. So I really appreciate your point about being anchored in your own values and thinking about how you can lead from there in terms of supporting and holding a space and having love and compassion. I think those are really meaningful. I appreciate all of you. These were really, really good conversations. And the most exciting thing about this panel was just like very different context that really enriches the conversation. Another question that I had for you, and the topic of the session is allyship and support. And allyship is always such a weird thing. I'm like, what does that exactly mean? So I'm really curious about what is your way of thinking about allyship and what that can do to help folks in this moment in terms of all the context that each of you talked about, both in the United States and Canada. And I wouldn't call on people, so maybe one of you would volunteer to start.
I can say a little bit about this because this was something that has been on my mind a lot lately. So, allyship, I think, in one of its manifestations, has the goal of, and like the requisite sort of, underpinnings of empathy and understanding and knowledge and really like seeking to understand like who a community is, what your intersections with that community are, et cetera. One of the things that happened this winter here in Minnesota with our ice enforcement was like a lot of allyship that felt sometimes performative, but that was also like non-consensual. In other words, there was sort of this idea, a lot of well-meaning people who wanted to support the international community came to us with all of their ideas about all of the things international students needed and wanted. And I will tell you, like half of those things were actually things that international students needed and wanted. So there's sort of this idea, like make sure like how you're being supportive or ways in which you might actually be causing damage because of the assumptions you're making as you enter this relationship with somebody as an ally, et cetera, right? Like I always go back to this notion of nothing about us without us, right? Like really important fundamental understanding of a community and also letting the community lead while being supported and making sure that your work is sort of grounded in sort of intentionality and connection with that community, not just assumptions you're making about that community. That feels really important to me in this moment. And one example I'll provide is one of the things that happened on our campus was sort of this idea that faculty should move all of their courses online for international students. Well, this created for us a bit of a compliance issue because you, having been an international student, Milad, know, right, that like in-person attendance and in-person courses is a requirement of our US visa system, right? And so that intention to help created other problems for us, right? That were in many ways in this moment where this administration is so compliance focused, sort of dangerous circumstances. So that's just something that comes to my mind immediately when I think of allyship and an example of maybe allyship gone wrong. I'm sorry, I should also say there were so many good examples of amazing allyship as well. So I don't want that to lead with that negative, but just to sort of say, like, let's be careful about it.
Yes, just to further build on that, I think that themes of presence and empathy are very important because the intersectional identities that Dr. Lam was talking about are very important. So what can happen in these circumstances is that international students at times can be seen as voiceless victims. And it might be coming from a good place, but then it translates into very problematic kind of, can translate into that. So I think this, so again, I've been thinking about when the institutional spaces have shrunk so much, what do our ethics and values, how can they support this kind of allyship? So the things that I think about are presence and empathy, which really means that becoming a good listener in terms of really listening to people and accepting that we don't know a lot. And in many cases, we might not be able to offer a lot. But I think it matters when we listen, because I think we all want to be seen and heard. And I think when that space is there, it does matter. Of course, there's so much more that needs to happen, needs to be done, and that itself doesn't address most of the issues. But at the same time, I think it is critically important to be there given the situation that we are in. Because even in the institutional spaces, the way support was often extended was in terms of, let's say, counting how many international students are there and then presenting those statistics as a site for celebration. And it is something to celebrate. But at the same time, it was not an invitation to bring your whole self into that space. It was counting of people and then turning that into representation. We have even moved away from that model, which had its own limitations, but perhaps this could help us engage with those issues in a more in-depth way and bringing that empathy and presence where we are inviting students and other people to bring their whole self into conversations. And I think a lot can emerge from that, hopefully, though that process might not be as even or linear as we expect it to be given the institutional context that we are part of. So that's one thing that I think is important. But also, there's emotional labor that is involved in that. If faculty and staff are doing it over and over and over again without much support from the institution, that does create that emotional labor. And it's not getting counted or rewarded in terms of the institutional mechanisms of measurement and evaluation. So people are not rewarded for that, whether those faculty or staff. In fact, in many ways, they get punished for putting in that time and investment. So it's certainly a complex arena, but I do feel that that's where I feel there's space for some transformation and for some real connections and solidarity.
Thank you, both of you. Those are there's a lot of good stuff there to think about when it comes to allyship. And I think building on Dr. Kershid's point about the structure of the institution, like a lot of these institutions haven't been designed in the first place to support things like allyship or being in solidarity or a lot of equity concepts. And so that's why it often feels like when you're doing the work, you're kind of bumping into walls just because the space was never created for that. And so I do spend a fair bit of time thinking about what is it even appropriate for me to call myself an ally when I'm working with students? Can I really be an ally as a director at an institution? What does and it shifts and changes when I'm thinking about myself as a researcher. And I think what I've done over time, and I don't know if this is the best approach, is I compartmentalize myself. So there's the researcher me, which is able to sort of tackle issues in a very different way than me as a leader in an institution. And what I've done over time with students is be very transparent with them about who they're talking to. Sometimes students have maybe read something that I wrote and they'll come and they want to talk to me about something. And I'm like, are you booking an appointment with me because you want to talk to me as the researcher me or as in the role I'm in this institution? Because you might get, usually the two identities merge, but there are times when I have to give different responses based on the scope and the power I might inhabit in either of those roles, right? And over time, I have found that students really appreciate the transparency. So when I say to them, this is what I can do for you, there's sometimes students in particular don't always understand the silent politics in an institution, right? That we all have to navigate in our day to day. And so being very clear to them about what is possible, like if they want to collaborate on some sort of event or some sort of program that's supporting their needs in that moment, I have to be very clear with them about what I'm able to offer. And I'll also be very clear about, do you actually want to collaborate with me or do you just need support? Do you need financial support? Do you need me to do grunt work in the background? There are actually different roles I'm willing to take on to show you support. That doesn't necessarily mean that I need you to have this event branded with my center on it, right? Because that's one of the other things too, is that and sometimes students do want that. They're like, no, we do want the university brand on it. We want to show everyone the university is behind us on this. Other times they're like, we don't want the university brand on that. This is a student-led initiative. We just need, they just actually need very indirect support. And those conversations have been really helpful in sort of peeling away some of those, I'm always thinking about how the structures that we're in and how power is sort of playing within those spaces, and having those very clear, transparent conversations really helps peel away some of that and really get to sort of the core of what is it going to mean for me and you to be in relationship, in a good relationship? What is support really going to look like in this moment? And if I think back over my career, some of the most meaningful and impactful programs I've been involved with have always been those that have been co-created, where we have done a lot of work to kind of peel away the structures, try to create as communal a space as possible, and really try to address the student needs. And it's been things, anywhere from various vigils that students want to hold where the vigil isn't just a vigil. It's not just about healing, but they have also wanted me to help support them in amplifying what they're saying during those vigils. And, I will ask them things like, do you want me to amplify this across the institution? Do you want me to amplify this among the student body? Or do you need me to actually amplify your message up to senior leadership? Where is that support needed? And those have been some of the most impactful, if I think about it over the years. Another example is town halls, where we had international town halls. We invited students from different places to talk about how they're, experiencing Islamophobia on campus and what do they need from institutions. And, in that work, it really was sort of background work. The students were really leading this, and those sorts of programs always stay on in my mind as spaces where I really learned and grew, and where it felt like for a moment I was able to really practice allyship or solidarity with those communities that were struggling.
Yeah, yeah. These are really, really wonderful uh, notes and strategies. I didn't really mention very well at the beginning of the meeting that there is some Q&A time at the end. So I want to let everybody in the audience know that if you have questions, please either put it in the chat box, or if you want to turn your camera off, so I know you want to just speak, and I will give you the space to ask questions from the panelists yourself. And the thread that I'm hearing in the conversation is this open, honest conversations, being able to listen and being able to actually engage meaningfully, back to what Will was sharing in terms of there are these competing agendas and people might come with good intentions, but it just might not align with what is possible. Um, and I know some of you, I think my next question was about support, and I also know several of you mentioned there are things that you wanted to mention. I think Will mentioned about ethics, and I guess my last questions, because we're approaching the end of the time, would be, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to share about, what else do you want to share about the support means? And also had this general question about the wisdom of the moment. So I would leave it open to you about what you want to share as we close this conversation. Or anything that you didn't get a chance to still speak to.
Can jump in quickly. I think thinking about the time we're in and what can internationalization do, it really got me thinking about some of my research and interviewing faculty about their international partnerships. One of the things that kept coming up over and over was this tension of wanting to be in a good partnership, in good relationship with others. But sometimes there's a tension between that and then aligning yourself to institutional requirements, and a lot of those were revolved around ranking and reputation, and that wasn't necessarily what faculty were thinking about their international partnership. And when they're choosing their partner, they're not necessarily, or they don't want to have to think about the ranking of the institution that they're coming from. And sometimes there's this tension with national interests. And, I've really been thinking about, can higher education spaces continue to be the example of what good support and what good global relationships can look like, especially during this time when we're not seeing good examples of it. And that's really my hope. I place a lot of value and hope in the work that global educators do, whether it's internationalization, intercultural training, the things under that umbrella. Like, to me, it's forging or creating the world that we want for the future. And I think we can just continue to push and be examples for that.
Thank you. Those are such wonderful reflections. I would say that for me, the closing thoughts are just reflecting on values and ethics that we have. And I think that was brought up earlier too, that why did we decide to be part of higher education as faculty, as researchers, as staff? There had to be a reason for that. Of course, it's a profession too, but it's not a profession that makes you, super rich or super visible or super successful in the way mainstream society thinks of it. So most of us have certain values, ethics, and questions that drew us to this space. And we always knew that the institutional politics was not always aligned with many of those questions, ethics, and values. But we felt that there was space to, or maybe some of us felt that there was space to push and create more space there. And if we look at the history of higher education in North America, it's not an even history, it's not a linear history. There are these ups and downs, there are these tensions, there are these struggles. And I think people who stayed committed to their ethics and values were the ones who created those spaces, who really changed the institution. But we have to, I think, I have to remind myself, and I try to remind the students too, that um, it the way institutions are, it doesn't mean that a good change means everything changes, or bad change means everything changes. There are pockets in which something transformative can happen, whereas other spaces where it's still very restrictive or can be very suppressive. But I think it is always the people with who show commitment and solidarity and focus on community who have made those spaces possible for international students. I mean, even if you think of international students in the US and Civil Rights Act, and how that made it possible for a large number of international students to come to the US. Of course, it didn't provide it like the perfect medium or institution, but it was a change that opened a lot of spaces for people. So whereas when in this critical moment, I think there's still space for change, there's still space for creativity. We might have to use different strategies and be more creative about it. But I think what we do right now can open those doors for many others.
I love forums like this because we get to learn so much from amazing colleagues. Um, I lately have been reminding our teams and reminding my community, like the values that we espouse in global education and that we teach through global learning opportunities are exactly the values, skills, dispositions that we need in this moment to get us through this space and time. Um, we need to anchor our work on our values as a mission and remind teams when they are afraid of sort of, like the invisible parent or the invisible legislator who's going to come after us or whatever, right? That like our mission and vision and the values and most of our strategic plans probably have the work that we're doing written all over them, right? So like, why are we turning away when our mission and vision encourages us and invites us to seek out this moment and to seek out internationalization? It is the right thing to do for all of our students because it is the only world that we live in. We don't live in a world anymore that doesn't have crossroads or footprints or trails through other countries. International education is one of the only sectors in the US economy, in fact, that isn't in a deficit. I mean, we may soon be if we continue to dismantle it, but it's something like the fifth or sixth largest sector of the US economy. And I think it's important for us, in addition to doing all that we can locally to support our students and to be there and be what they need in this moment, like we need to advocate and make sure that we're helping other people understand these values, understand the statistics, understand the economic, social, emotional, and cultural impact that internationalizing our campuses and communities does for all of us, right? So we've really focused on building those networks with our local business community, inviting all of our local area leaders in the business community to really rally behind us. And it's been super effective in shifting that narrative a little bit and reminding folks like we're all on the same team. And again, remembering Milad, you'll recall this, our work from, the work with Dr. Watt and her team, right? Like when it gets hard, let's turn to wonder, right? Let's remind ourselves about curiosity and the value of curiosity and taking a pause to help bring communities together. And again, remind folks of our shared mission and values in higher education and in global education specifically.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. This has been really a wonderful conversation. I have written a lot of notes for myself, and I did learn a lot personally, going from north to south this time. Dr. Lam, Dr. Kakil Burns, Dr. Khurshid, thank you so much. This has been amazing, and I'm so appreciative of you giving us your time and wisdom. I want to really quickly also share a few things with the audience. That as a reminder, we would be having several positions opened, and I encourage you to join us with the commission and be with this group. We would like to remind you that the colloquium is not done. The last session will be May 1st, and it's titled Finding Capacity with an Emotional and Political Crisis, and it's presented by Dr. Katie Koo and Abu Arif. We hope that you please consider joining us again next week. And also, as a reminder, if you join 3 out of the 4 sessions in the colloquium, you will be able to receive a certificate of completion. Please make sure that you fill out the form that I posted in the chat box. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. It was wonderful to have you, and have a good Friday and weekend.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful meeting everyone. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Ditto.
Thank you.
Same, everybody.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much.